Can you imagine being forced to spend $1 billion on something you never even wanted? Not a bad investment, not a risky bet that went sideways, but a purchase you had to make. That's the exact spot Japan's premier airline, All Nippon Airways, found itself in back in 2016. The pressure came from one of the world's giant plane makers, Airbus, and it came with a shocking proposition. Buy a fleet of superjumbos that a smaller, bankrupt airline couldn't pay for, or watch your biggest American rival get a powerful and potentially crippling foothold in your home market. This wasn't a simple negotiation over a few planes. This was a high-stakes game of corporate chess, where the pawns were the largest passenger planes ever built, and the prize was control of one of the world's most profitable aviation markets. This is the story of the billion-dollar handshake that trapped an airline, and how a plane nobody wanted became a national icon. Our story starts not with a giant like ANA, but with a much smaller, incredibly ambitious player, Skymark Airlines. In the early 2010s, Skymark was a Japanese low-cost carrier with dreams of playing in the big leagues. It wanted to break out of its domestic bubble and launch prestigious international routes, going head-to-head with the titans of Japanese aviation, ANA, and Japan Airlines. And if you're going to make that kind of statement, you need a statement aircraft. In 2014, Skymark placed an audacious order for 6 Airbus A380s. To put that in perspective, this was a small budget airline ordering a fleet of the most expensive, largest, and most complicated passenger jets ever made. Each A380 is a double-decker behemoth, a flying giant designed for the world's biggest mega hubs. For an airline of Skymark's size, it was like a corner store trying to buy a fleet of 18-wheelers. It was a gamble of epic proportions. And it failed spectacularly. By 2015, the financial weight of that ambition came crashing down. Drowning in debt, Skymark Airlines filed for bankruptcy. Left in the wreckage was a massive $1 billion IOU to Airbus for the A380s it could no longer take. For Airbus, this was an obvious disaster. The A380 program was already under huge pressure. Airlines were canceling orders, choosing smaller, more efficient jets like the Boeing 787 Dreamliner and Airbus's own A350s. The last thing Airbus needed was a public bankruptcy and several half-finished superjumbos sitting in its factories with no one to take them. These weren't just planes, but they were a $1 billion problem that Airbus desperately needed to solve. Skymark's collapse created a power vacuum, and the vultures started circling. A bankruptcy restructuring was coming, and whoever led it could gain serious influence in Japan. 2 key players immediately stepped into the ring. First up was All Nippon Airways, better known as ANA. As one of Japan's 2 dominant carriers, ANA wasn't interested in owning Skymark, but it was obsessed with protecting its turf. The Japanese aviation market, especially the prized slot-controlled airports like Tokyo Haneda, is notoriously hard for foreign airlines to break into. ANA and its rival, Japan Airlines, controlled the domestic flights that fed their international networks. Skymark held some of those precious Haneda slots. For ANA, keeping those slots out of a competitor's hands was everything. The second player was Delta Airlines, one of the biggest carriers in the US and a global powerhouse. For years, Delta had been trying to crack the Japanese domestic market. A partnership with a local carrier would let it funnel passengers from all over Japan onto its profitable trans-Pacific flights. Delta saw Skymark's bankruptcy as its golden ticket. By sponsoring a rescue plan, it could finally get the foothold it had always wanted and disrupt the duopoly that had ruled Japanese skies for decades. The battle lines were drawn. On one side, a domestic champ, ANA, fighting to protect its kingdom. On the other, a foreign giant, Delta, fighting for a rare chance to break in. And caught right in the middle was Airbus, holding the $1 billion debt that would give it the power to pick the winner. What happened next was a masterclass in corporate power playing. Airbus held the biggest financial claim in Skymark's bankruptcy, meaning its vote on any rescue plan was the one that mattered. Both ANA and Delta came forward with competing bailout packages, each trying to win Airbus's crucial support. Delta, a huge Airbus customer globally, had a strong plan to save Skymark that would also achieve its own strategic goals. But Airbus was playing a different game. Its problem wasn't just getting some of its money back. Its problem was the A380s themselves. The program's reputation was fragile, and finding a new, prestigious home for these white-tail aircraft, also known as planes built without a buyer, was a top priority. ANA presented its own plan, mainly designed to block Delta, and this is where Airbus saw its opening. According to analyses of the deal, Airbus approached ANA with a proposition that was less of a threat and more of an offer it couldn't refuse. It would throw its decisive support behind ANA's plan, killing Delta's ambitions in Japan and securing ANA's dominance. But this support came at a very specific, very, very large price. ANA had to solve Airbus's A380's problem. It had to take the planes. Specifically, ANA was maneuvered into placing a firm order for 3 brand new Airbus A380s. For Airbus, it was a genius move. It didn't just solve the financial mess from Skymark's default, it also landed Japan's first ever A380 operator, adding a blue chip name to the aircraft's dwindling customer list. Airbus's CEO praised the A380's efficiency for crowded airports, but the reality was clear. This wasn't a sale based on need. It was a sale born of pure leverage. For ANA, the choice was agonizing. This was an airline whose whole strategy was built around the supreme efficiency of twin-engine jets like the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Now, it was being strong-armed into buying a 4-engine giant that made no sense for its fleet. The A380 was too big, too expensive to fly, and didn't fit anywhere in its network. But the alternative, letting Delta set up shop in its backyard, was so much worse. As one analyst perfectly put it, ANA didn't buy aircraft. ANA bought protection, influence, and long-term control. The billion-dollar handshake was done. So, ANA said yes. They agreed to the deal, taking a 16.5% stake in the new Skymark Airlines and, most importantly, signing on the dotted line for 3 Airbus A380s. Strategically, ANA had won. Delta's plan was dead in the water, its Japanese ambitions crushed. The domestic market was secure. Sure, they paid a king's ransom, but they had successfully defended their kingdom. The cost of operating 3 unwanted A380s was a price worth paying to keep a major competitor out. For Airbus, the victory was just as sweet. They had turned a defaulting low-cost carrier into a brand new order from one of the world's most respected airlines. It was a massive PR win. ANA became the 14th operator of the A380, lending some badly needed credibility to the struggling program. Airbus had taken a financial crisis and spun it into a strategic victory, finding a home for at least 3 more of its superjumbos. The whole affair was a textbook example of aviation politics. It was a complex dance between an airline fighting for its life, a manufacturer protecting its flagship product, and 2 giants locked in a battle for the same market. In the end, the winner wasn't decided by who had the better plane or the better business plan, but by who had the most leverage. In this case, that leverage came in the form of $1 billion debt and 3 very large, very unwanted airplanes. With the ink dry on the contract, a new and daunting reality set in for ANA. What on earth were they going to do with 3 of the biggest passenger jets on the planet? Publicly, the airline put on a brave face, but internally, they knew the operational challenge was immense. First, the sheer size. ANA's chosen a 520-seat configuration, with first class, business, premium economy, and economy was simply massive. Filling that many seats consistently is a monumental task. The risk of flying half empty and losing a fortune on every flight was incredibly high. The plane's economics just couldn't compete with the nimble, fuel-sipping Boeing 787s that were the heart of ANA's fleet. Second, there was infrastructure. The A380 is big on the ground too. It needs special gates with 2-level jet bridges and reinforced taxiways. Because of these demands, ANA couldn't even fly the plane from Tokyo's most convenient airport, Haneda. The A380s were stuck at the more distant Narita International Airport, which limited their flexibility. Then, just as ANA was finally launching its A380 service in 2019, the world stopped. The COVID-19 pandemic brought global travel to a screeching halt. The timing couldn't have been worse. ANA had bet its entire A380 strategy on a single high-demand tourist route. When that demand vanished overnight, its 3 brand new $100 million jets were left sitting on the tarmac, grounded. It looked like the A380s were about to become one of the most expensive mistakes in modern aviation. Faced with a potential billion-dollar blunder, ANA did something brilliant. Instead of hiding their problem planes, they made them the main event. They embraced the plane's uniqueness and turned its limitations into a strength, crafting a strategy so creative that it transformed the A380 from a liability into a beloved icon. The airline decided to fly the entire A380 fleet on just one route, Tokyo Narita to Honolulu, Hawaii. This was a direct challenge to Japan Airlines, which had long dominated the incredibly popular Japan to Hawaii tourist market. By putting a 520-seat A380 on this route, ANA could instantly double its capacity and make a huge splash. But they didn't just fly the plane. They gave it an identity. ANA branded the A380s as the Flying Honu, named after the revered Hawaiian green sea turtle. Each of the 3 planes got its own unique, special paint job. The first was blue for the Hawaiian sky, the second was emerald green for the ocean, and the third was orange for the sunset. They weren't just A380s anymore. They were Lani, Kai, and Ra, or Sky, Sea, and Sun. This marketing masterstroke turned a flight into an event. The journey itself became part of the vacation. After being grounded by the pandemic, the Flying Honu returned to the skies in July 2022, and demand from Japanese tourists came roaring back. By late 2023, ANA was running double daily flights to Honolulu, with the A380s from Narita forming the core of a strategy that offered more seats to Hawaii than ever before. ANA had taken the plane it never wanted and turned it into a celebrated symbol of travel and escape. The saga of ANA's A380 is more than just a weird story in aviation history. It's a powerful look at how corporate strategy works, where the moves made in the boardroom are often more important than how a plane performs in the air. It reveals the fierce, invisible battles that define the airline industry. A small carrier's bankruptcy in Japan sent shockwaves all the way to boardrooms in Atlanta and factory floors in France. It shows that for legacy airlines, protecting your home market is everything. And sometimes the best defense is a reluctant offense. In this case, buying 3 superjumbos to keep a rival out. ANA was backed into a corner and forced into a billion-dollar purchase. But instead of letting the unwanted planes become a financial disaster, they turned them into a marketing triumph. The Flying Honu is proof that even a problematic asset can become an incredible tool with enough creativity. In the end, everyone got something they wanted. Airbus dodged a messy write-off. Delta was blocked, but lived to fight another day. And ANA, the airline trapped by a handshake, successfully defended its turf. The A380 may have been the plane ANA never wanted, but it was the price of victory. A billion-dollar strategic gambit paid for with 4 engines and a giant, smiling turtle on the side.